Hey everybody, welcome back. We're going to continue on creating an actual ASP.NET website. This is going to be the third tutorial on how to do so. The first one focused on just connecting to MySQL database for user registration and for logging in. The second one was more creating a logout button and also checking for malicious input by using parameterized strings for the SQL query, and also checking the user's input against a whitelist of valid characters. This third one, we're going to do a little bit more of input validation, such as, when the registration form for any website, we actually have um, the website asking for the person's phone number, possibly the email, the first, middle, last name. For example, the email field, you want to make sure that the person entered in a valid email, meaning that it only has one @ symbol and it doesn't have multiple .coms in the actual name itself. So we're going to be doing a little bit of that, and at the same time I'm going to be doing a little bit of I'm going to show how to do salt with hashing with your ASP.NET website with the MySQL database. And not only that, I'm going to show it with a slow hashing function, which is very good for reasons of protection and security. That usually salts and hashes are pretty quick functions, but when you introduce a key factor that makes it go slower over time, when people try to hack into a database or a website with someone's credentials, it could make their time a lot more difficult to do so. So without further ado, what I guys want you to do is go over to this one page over here, crackstation.net slash hashing security with a hyphen in between .html. And this has a good explanation about salts and hashing and what are the pros and cons of hashing. And one of my favorite things about this website is that it has source code for a slow hashing function. And this hashing algorithm is called the PBKDF2. So without further ado, guys, actually what I want you to do is basically copy this. We're basically going to just create a new C# file within our ASP.NET website, and we're just going to paste that all inside there. So let's just call it password hash, and let's make sure that it has the same namespace as the rest of the actual project, which is I believe web app demo. Okay, great, we have that. One more thing I actually want to add, I want to add another C# file just to do that whitelist, or I should say that input validation check that I mentioned before, guys. Just a good thing to have. This file is not handling any of the hacking things that we mentioned in the second tutorial, but it will check for, like, length of actual first name, middle name, last name, if your website actually requires like a minimum length, for example. So what we're going to do here is we're going to create a few methods here that's going to be called in the main classes itself. And the first one we're going to create is a static method called validate password. It's going to take in two strings. We're going to have this variable be returned. And in between, what we're going to do here basically is if p1.equals p2, that equals false, pass equals false, and that's what's going to be returned. So we got that one thing over there. Now we're going to have a validate phone number. And it's just going to take one parameter. And the reason why we're having a validate phone number is that in the MySQL database, you're probably just going to set it as a string with or an integer of just 10 characters if it's an American phone number. But a lot of times on an actual user form, people will probably enter in the parentheses encapsulating their area code, or they probably have a hyphen between the next 3 digits of the phone number versus their last 4 digits, or they probably have the area code separated with a period by the next three numbers and another period followed by the last four numbers. So here we're basically going to just kind of strip all of that out and just store it in as a plain text, or sorry, just a plain string text without any other special characters other than integers. So let's do this here, equals pnum. So this just contains a parentheses here. We're just going to pretty much strip it out. Okay. It's going to be pretty repetitive, guys, for the next minute or so. So if you guys just bear with me, or if you guys want to just kind of forward on to the next 2 or 3 minutes on, hopefully we'll be past this portion right here. Let me just kind of copy this 1 second. Next, I'm going to check if it has a hyphen. Just replace the hyphen. If it has a period, just replace that with a blank space. And one other check here, if it has a white or an empty space, a white space, let's just get rid of that too. And now we're going to check to make sure that the phone number is actually 10 digits long. So after all of the stripping of the special characters in a phone number, if it's not equal to 10 characters long, then it's not a valid phone number. We set the boolean pass flag to false, and that's what's going to return to the main function. So now we're going to have another function here called validate main. It's going to take one parameter. So let's do this. And here we're just making sure that when we're validating a user's name, whether it be their first name, middle name, or last name in the text box field, that if they try to introduce anything other than the letters or numbers, and I should probably strip away the numbers because no one has a number as a part of their name, but I guess just for now we'll leave it as such. So if their name doesn't match that white list of characters, then it's going to return false. And we're also going to check to make sure that what was entered is at least 1 character long. And if it's 0 characters long, then we know that the person didn't enter in anything for the first, middle, or last name. We could make the middle name optional, but just for this purpose demonstration, we're just going to make sure that everybody enters in a middle name too. And then we're going to return the pass variable there. Okay, I think that's pretty much that for the input validation file. Okay, I forgot there's a couple more methods I got to create over here, guys, so just bear with me. This is going to be very similar to the one above, validate name, but instead of just making sure that it's at least an input of one size, we're going to make sure that the name is actually between 7 to 15 characters long. So let me go ahead and just do this. And what I'm going to do here is actually do the same thing as above with this check against a regular expression list. And what we're going to do here is do that extra check for character length. And if it fails this check, we're going to pass back false, indicating that the input is incorrect. And the last thing we're going to add over here is validating the email. So here's what we're going to do. Basically, we're grabbing the first index of the at symbol where it occurs and the last index of where it occurs. And if they're not the same index, then we know that there's two different at symbols in the actual email name, which is invalid. So let's go ahead and continue this. This first check actually just is to split up all of the strings that actually have every single time that there's an at symbol, just kind of split it up, and if it occurs more than once, then we know that it's invalid. Also, if index 1 not equals to index 2, this is what I was going about earlier. If they equal the same index, then we know there's only one occurrence of this at symbol, but if they are different index positions, then we know that the person entered in two at symbols, which makes it invalid. And next thing we're going to check is just to make sure that it's not empty. And this trim function just basically clears away the trailing and leading white spaces from the input passed in. Okay, there we go. We're done with that right now. Okay guys, from here what we want to do is go into your MySQL workbench that we had before. Go to your web app demo database. Go to your user registration table. We are going to add a field into this table. When we do the whole salt with hash function from that file that we got from that CrackStation website, we're going to be using a different, we're going to be inputting that information into a different column right now. So the ones that we have right now, just leave it as is, but I just wanted to add another field here without touching anything that we've done already in the previous two tutorials. So we're going to call this slow hash salt, and let's make this at least 80 characters long. It's probably overkill, but I just want to make sure we have enough space here. Okay, we're good with that. So now what we're going to do is go back to your web application, and what we're going to do is going to add another function to the Registration.aspx.cs file. If you remember, we have this register user that just basically does straight input into the actual MySQL database. Now we're going to go ahead and do so with that hashing function that we got from crackstation.net. So what we're going to do here is we're not going to delete anything, but what we're going to do is just create another method here, private void register user with slow hash. The name might be a little misleading because we're not doing any slow hashing at all at this point, but we will be using some of the methods from that password hash class that we put in here to enter the user's information and password in hash format. Okay, here guys, we're gonna, before we actually do anything with the hashing itself, we're gonna do basically all of those annoying little checks that we did in the other input validation file. So we're gonna do this if input validation dot validate phone number if it equals false, that is within equal false. Now we're going to check the validation of the first, middle, and last name. If input validation dot status equals false. And since we're going to do that for all of the names, first, middle, and last, let's just copy this real quick. Okay. Validate the user input, their username and their password. We're going to check those. And we're going to validate their email here. And if the user's input on the registration page actually passes all of those validation checks, then we're going to actually create SQL queries and use the password hash function for storing the user's initial credentials into the MySQL database. If method status equals true still after all of that, then we'll continue on to the more fun stuff. So here we're going to do what we did in the first video of grabbing the connection string from the web.config file, and you're going to reference it by the name web app constring. This is going to grab all of this information here and store it into the constring local variable there. So now let's create a new connection. Create a blank query string right now. Here's where we're going to fill in the main query. Of course, I don't have to have this top query string here. It's actually kind of silly that I have it there, but it's just for now. Let's just leave it there. Before I fill in that query string, let me just finish the rest of the actual code. I'm going to create a new command. I'm going to pass in a query string and the actual SQL connection itself. So, okay, let's hold off on that right now. Okay, so just to spare some time with actual typing, I'm just going to go ahead and copy this query string from the original registered user that we have down here. There's a couple things I do want to change around though. First off, instead of storing into the password field, what we're going to do is we're going to store into the newly created field that we have here, the slow hash salt. So let's change that with that. And instead of taking the user straight text, we're going to do what we did in the Default.aspx site and use parameterized strings. So what we're going to do is actually just kind of get rid of all of this right now, and we're going to use the syntax here with the whole question mark, first name, email, username, slow hash salt. Okay, now we're going to fill that in afterwards. Okay, but first we're going to leave this line of text here, and then we're going to add the fields afterwards, the parameterized string. So command add with value. So here we're going to put in the first name, I'm going to do this for the other parameterized strings here. First name, I spelled something wrong here. Okay, let's do the same thing for the username. And now we're going to actually use the password hash function from that CrackStation website. So here, let's do this, string salt hash returned. It's going to equal password hash dot create hash, which is going to take the password text box field that we have. And we're going to do a little bit of funky indexing here, of grabbing the certain things from the actual create hash. The create hash itself will return a string with two colons in between. The first colon, or the beginning of the string to the first colon, is actually the iteration key. The second, or the first colon to the second colon string text, I believe, is the salt, and from the second colon to the end of the string is the actual hash itself. So we're going to do a little bit of funky stuff here, but just kind of follow me along. Int comma index equals salt hash return dot index of first colon, and the extracted string is going to equal salt hash returned substring from the first index to the comma index. And it's not even really a comma index, it's kind of actually a horrible name for it. It's the colon index. So just forgive me right there. Once that's returned to the extract string, what we're going to do here is do comma index again. Okay. Okay, so yeah, there we go, there's that. And I'll just make this little note here, guys, that from the first colon to the second is the salt. From the second colon to the end is the hash. So now what we're going to do is add this last parameterized string, command parameters add with value. Salt hash returned, and this is slow hash salt. We're going to execute the command and then close the connection string. So now with that done, we should be able to ready to register people using the new hash salt that we created right now. So let me just make sure that everything is there the way it should be, and let's actually start trying to register a couple people. Alright, so let's do this first one here, just making up some names. Paul John Jones, JJ at Gmail. Just making up these names here, guys. P Jones 1234. Register. As mentioned before, I don't have anything saying that you're successfully registered on this website. It would have been a good indication to actually have that there, but if you just go back to our table over here, if if you remember our previous query, I don't know if I actually showed it. Shame on me for not doing so. You'll see this over here, and this has the original 2 people that we actually created for this database. But if we refresh this, okay guys, I think I messed up a little bit here. His name is actually not there, but I think I know why. If you guys remember, I had a validate user input and made sure that the username password that's actually passed in is within a certain character length, at least 7 characters long, and this name here is at least 1 short. So if I actually go ahead and do this, Paul J. Jones, this should actually go ahead and put his name into the database. So let's let it finish what it's doing. If we go over here, you'll see that his name is now inserted into the database over here. And you can see here, here's the actual slow hash salt that's been entered in using the password hash function from that CrackStation website. You can see that there's a colon here. Here's the first iteration key. Here's the, I think, the salt, or it could be the hash. I forgot off the top of my mind. Forgive me, guys. And the second half over here, after the second colon, is the other, the hash or the salt, whichever the first section is not. So apologize for that, guys. My mind's kind of slippy right now, but I guess just so I don't forget this password later on, it's not intended to be stored here, but just for demonstration purposes afterwards, I'm going to store it here into the password. And let's just apply that. We're going to go ahead and add one more person. Elaine Johnson. Let's just change the first number. I don't really care what the phone number is. Kristen EJ. So we're going to go ahead and register. It's going to do its thing. If you do this again, you see her name now there. And just like before, you're going to see this slow hash salt actually filled in with the 2 colons separating it out into appropriate information there. So let me go ahead and just like before, just put this in there for now. Of course, you never want to store that as plain text. And we can test out the actual logging in using that information, but first we actually have to write the code to log in. So give me a second to do that. Okay guys, so let's go ahead and stop this application. Let's go to the default and okay, let's do things a little different right now. Let's go ahead and actually create another function here just so we don't overdo anything that we've already done before. Private void login with password hash function. So let's start off by creating a couple of local member variable lists. You'll see why they're needed in a minute. And let's do this one try catch here. Okay. So now let's get the connection string from the web.config file. For the life of me, I cannot remember that. Web app constring. Okay, let's create a new connection. Query string. Let's create a new command. Put the query string and the connection string. Okay. Okay. Okay, now that we're done reading in the usernames that match what the person actually inputted into the default or the main page login, now we're going to check to see if the result returned from the query is actually empty. So let's check to see if it's not null, the salt hash list. If it is not empty, then we know that we actually have a few matching usernames in the actual database, but now we're going to extract the password and use that to see if it actually matches what the person entered. So what we're going to do now is we're going to iterate through that actual list. So let's see here, just follow along guys. And in the validate password function from that crack station source code, we're going to pass in the original password text box. We don't actually have to grab that from the MySQL database, and we're going to pass in the salt hash list, the first index of it in this salt hash list. And of course, this is going to return true or false. And if it's true, let's do this check. Then we know we have a valid user. We try to log in, and we were to authenticate him with this password hash function here. And basically, what we're going to do is we're going to create the session uname, and we're going to just pass it person's full name that we have in the names list at the same index. And then we're going to actually try to pass the person to the logged in page itself. And we're going to do a simple print line statement over here that if the person isn't authenticated, we're just going to insert it into the actual password text box, just to give the user some sort of indication here. So now we can actually go ahead and try to do the user login. So let's go ahead and just kind of compile this, make sure there's no errors. Let's run it. And here, let's actually put in the person's username and password that we've actually have here before. Username is Paul J. Jones and password is pjones1234. We log in, we're actually able to log in. Hello, Paul John Jones. Let's do the same thing for the other person that we actually have here. Kristen EJ, and it's Kristen EJ11. And it gives us the full name. And you guys may think I'm cheating real quick over here when I'm actually grabbing the username and password. You guys are probably thinking, well, yeah, it's actually going to work. I mean, that's the username and password that's actually stored into the database. Which you guys, if you guys forgot already, I just put in this password here just so I don't forget. I could have just wrote that in the source code itself, so this probably wouldn't have existed in the database to begin with. These other two names here were from the first tutorial, so we're going to forget them for now. But in the login page, if you remember, all we did was extract the first name, middle name, last name, and the username. I'm sorry, we extracted the first name, middle name, last name, and the slow hash salt column whenever the username matches what the usernames we grab those four columns whenever the username in the text box that the person enters in matches a username within this database over here. So if we actually kind of go step through the code again, let me just go ahead and put a little debug mark over here, and let's do this again. Let's do Paul J. Jones, Where's the mark over here? Oh guys, sorry again. I goofed once more. I created this function here, and I didn't actually even call it in the method itself. So let's go ahead and do that. And the reason why it worked, guys, was for the exact same reason when I said that you guys suspected that I might have been cheating, because this initial code over here actually does grab the username and the password field. So by me actually putting it in for P. Jones and Kristen, I was in effect, in a sense, pretty much cheating there. But now that I have the initial code commented out and I have the new code ready to go, let's do the same thing. Okay, so let's do this again with Kristen. Okay, it's stepping through, so I guess let's just do this the first time. And we're getting the whole connection string from the web.config file. We're going to be grabbing all of the slow hash salt, first name, middle name, last name, whenever there's a column within the database that matches what the user put into the login field. In this instance, if there's a match for Kristen EJ, this while loop will basically execute, and as long as there's something returned by the command to the reader, it's gonna go through this while loop. And what it does is stores the slow hash salt into this local variable here. That's from the actual column that is generated from the registration page. It gets stored into the list over here, and I store in the first, middle, last name into an actual local variable, which then gets sent to the names list itself. So there's only one column or one entry in the database that has that matching username, so it only iterates through once through that while loop. It goes to the salt hash list if it's not null, which it isn't. It'll increment through that, and it'll put in the person's password entered in from the text box and match it with the salt hash list into the validate password. If it returns true, which it does, then it's an authenticated person, and we'll actually see this get passed to the login page as we saw before. And if we do this again for P. Jones, it'll be the same thing. Let's take away the debugger here. We say hello, Paul John Jones. If we try to do the same thing, but let's add 5. He will not be found. As you see here, is actually not getting entered into the next page. User is not authenticated. User not authenticated. Okay guys, I know this took a little bit longer than I hoped it would, but this is pretty much how you would implement that one slow hashing function over here from this CrackStation website. I highly recommend everybody who's interested in hashing and salting and using a slow salting function actually read this whole entire web page. This site is actually very good and informational for what we just did right now. So hopefully this helped some people learn what they were looking for, and if you have any questions, please let me know. Thanks guys.